the country than, again, anyone that I know of. When you think of David McFarlane, he is an encourager. He is an inspirer. He's a strategic planner. He's a great church consultant and an awesome speaker. The joke I use a lot is, and if you want to use this line, I just encourage you to do so. I'm getting business cards made up, and on the back it says, "I'm a friend of David McFarlane." Like, actually, your capital will just hit the roof. So I would just suggest you do that as well. Without further ado, let's welcome David McFarlane.
Thank you, Jim. God bless you. Awesome. Good to be back, and nice that the technology is working. Appreciate that. Wow. Okay. Good.
Say one thing about technology. I'm going to come close to your mic. David and I spent some time last night because it's just bothering us with this cutting in and out of the mic and so forth, and especially this and so many things. So we changed some things, but we also prayed. And this morning it's been perfect. Now I'm going to give the credit to the prayer, but we did change some things. But now if this thing breaks up again, we know it wasn't the prayer. Oh, ye of little faith.
Excellent. Thank you. Wow. Well, I have the privilege of serving with Billy Graham. How many of you have been blessed by Billy Graham over the years? Absolutely. While you're doing that, let me just comment that I have some Billy Graham videos at the table in that other room that are free. And one of them is the latest one called Value of a Soul, to show to an unsaved friend or neighbor. Excellent videos, cost $2 million to produce. They're free. They're on my table over there. Also, you can buy my book, Ignite Your Life, Living for Significant, $20. And we're doing an evangelism conference in Niagara Falls at the Hilton. You might want to go to that. Okay, it's all Canadian speakers, by the way. So go to the table last time and pick whatever it is that you want up. The videos are free, remember. That's pretty cool. The story I like about Billy Graham is an old one about Billy Graham was speaking at one of these big events. And how many of you have been to his big events? Spoken at, okay, right. Well, he was speaking at one of these big events, and he was going to the hotel between the meetings, and as he's leaving, he realizes he wants to mail a letter, and he doesn't know where he is because it's a new city. So he sees a little boy sitting on the sidewalk, and he says to the little boy, "Where's the post office?" And the kid rolls his eyes and says, "Everybody knows where the post office is. 1 block that way, 2 blocks that way." Okay? Dr. Graham said, "Thank you, son." As he'd walk away, he said, "By the way, I'm speaking tonight at the big auditorium. Would you like to come?" The kid said, "What are you speaking on?" And Billy Graham says, "I'm talking how to get to heaven. Will you come?" The kid says, "No, you don't even know how to get to the post office." Okay. There we go. Good stuff. There was this man, and he was a grandfather, and he's fishing with his grandson. And the grandson was taking the little minnows, and the grandfather was putting them on the hook every time, putting them on the hook for the little grandson to fish. The grandson says to the grandfather, "Grandfather, are you going to die?" And the grandfather says, "Yes, one day I'm going to die. I'm going to be with Jesus." And the kid thinks for a minute and says, "But if you're going to die, who's going to be here to put the minnow on my hook?" And the grandfather says this, "When that day comes, it will be your turn to put the minnow on another little boy's hook." That's what this conference is about. Somebody has ministered to us. Somebody has given us the gospel. Maybe it was your mother, your father, maybe it was a neighbor, somebody. But now this is about passing it on. It's about helping others go through the door that we have had the privilege of knowing. The psalmist says this, "Even when I'm old and gray, do not forsake me, O God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your might to all who are to come." God, help me to do what needs to be done. As I'm getting older, my responsibility now is to make sure that the younger generation that are coming behind me hear about you and get to know God. That's my responsibility. Now, the truth is that the young people are the future. They have always been the future, and they are the future again. Whether the young people will be Christians in the future or not depends on us. Nobody else. Nobody else. Nobody else. There was an old man, and he was building a bridge, and some people looked at this old man in his 80s building this bridge across this little river, and they said, "Why are you bothering to do that? You're an old man, you're building a bridge, you're not going to live long enough to even use the bridge very much." And he said, "I'm not building the bridge for myself. I'm building it for the young people that are coming behind me to help them cross." That's what this conference has to be about, reaching the next generation. And really, it's amazing to see the young people, the excitement, the people that are passionate about their faith in the younger generation are amazing. They're a real blessing to me as I minister to them. I meet them across the country, people that are doing creative new things, and older people that are giving them opportunities to do things, and the giftedness they have, and the spiritual hunger is just incredible. Somebody said that the young people today are praying to every god out there, to Allah, to Buddha, to Oprah. And the truth is that they are spiritually hungry. But the challenge is that often our churches are no passing zones. And we don't pass on to the next generation. And sometimes what bothers me is Sunday schools are just babysitting services instead of seeing it as leading them to Christ and discipling them and helping them to become the teenager that knows God in a real, authentic way. And wow, imagine what we could do if we really took this thought to heart. I've been asked often, "David, you cross the country all the time, and what's the greatest need in the church?" And as I look at the church, the outward-looking need is that we need to regain our sense of mission. We've forgotten who we are and why we're here. We end up being keepers of the aquarium instead of fishers of men. But the biggest need is different than that. It's really a matter of heart. You see, if we really loved lost people like Jesus loved lost people, we would reach them. My mom used to say, "Love will always find a way. Indifference will always find an excuse." You know, it's not about methods. We've got more methods for reaching people in English than any other country in the world. We've got videos, we've got online, you name it. But the reason why it's not happening isn't because we don't have the tools. I think it's because we don't have the will. It really is a matter of will. If we wanted to do this, we would find a way. Wow. Okay, John Maxwell told a story years ago went to a church, and there was an old man, 35 years. He said, "I've been on the board for 35 years. And he said, "Oh, John Maxwell, you must have seen lots of changes in 35 years. The old man said, "Yes, and I've been against every one of them." And after the churches are no passing zones. No, we don't want to change. So let's go. Empower our future. So here's a young woman. Can we pass the knowledge of God on to her? Can we? Can we? And the answer is yes, of course we can. Yeah, that's right. But not just like that. We only do it when in love we care enough to learn and speak her language and relate to her issues. Will we? That's a stupid question, isn't it? It is a dumb question. I mean, if we don't reach the future, we haven't got one. Peanuts cartoon. You remember Snoopy and Peanuts and Charlie Brown? And so Lucy says to Charlie Brown, on a cruise ship, there are people that get their folding chair and they put it at the back of the boat because they want to see where they've been. And then there are people who put their folding chair on the side of the boat to see where they are right now. And there are people who put their folding chair on the bow of the boat because they want to see into the future where they're going. But you, Charlie Brown, you can't even get it unfolded. and so every one of us is in one of those three categories. We're either at the back wishing that the old days had come back, or we're looking now at where things are. But the people that we need today in the church are on the bow of the boat. They're looking to the future, and the future is the younger generation. How do we reach this world, this different people than us? And it's people like you and me, older folk. We have a saying in Spanish that at my age I'm closer to the harp than the guitar. Okay. There you go. There was a little plane, and the plane had an instructor teaching this guy to fly, and the plane lands with the instructor and the new guy learning, and it bounces and bounces and bounces I've been on flights like that. Bounces, a horrible landing. And the instructor turns to the pilot and says to him, "That was a terrible landing you did." And he said, "I did? I thought you were doing it." And you know, when it comes to evangelism, that's how we feel. I thought you were doing it. But it isn't. It's up to me. What can I possibly do in our world? Somebody said, if you want something different in the next 20 years, we need to do something now different for 20 years. Wow. This is old. It's from 2008, 8 years ago. But it shows you the red is Protestant. Back in 1984, like nearly 35% of teenagers would identify themselves as Protestant. Now it's gone down to 10%, and if that slide continues, we're in 2016, we see that it's crazy. We're losing the battle if we keep doing what we're doing. And you see the ones that are growing are no faith at all, and other faiths are growing. Wow. So what do we do for people like this? My brother, I have a brother called Peter, and he went parachuting in South America. In South America, they don't have all the rules and regulations and safety that we have here. So they didn't give him a training at all. They just gave him a parachute. It's a true story. And he puts a parachute on, they take him up. And then they just push him out of the plane. And so he has a rip cord he knows to pull. He said, "How long do I have the rip to pull the cord?" He said, "As long as you want to live." And the truth is that we're already out of the plane. We're already out of the plane. How long have we got? Just the rest of our life. We can't just keep doing what we're doing. Now, I want to use a story from the Old Testament again, this time the story of Samuel, for the points I want to make, if I could do that. And here we see the story of Samuel. This is where I'm going to start. 1 Samuel 3:15. Samuel lay down until morning and then opened the doors of the house of the Lord. This young man brings revival to Israel. He brings a spiritual revival. But it starts earlier than that in this story. He's in the house of God, and he lays down until morning. And we've got a younger generation out there that needs to be woken up. They're going to be woken up to the things of God. They need to know that there is a door, and Jesus is the answer. Okay. The door is open. So let's look at a few things that I learned from the story that apply to how I can be more effective in reaching out to the next generation. Number one is to examine and to understand. Examine to understand. You see, here it tells us what the context was, what the community was like at that time. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. He was a priest. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. I read that the first time, and I thought, Canada. That's what I thought, Canada. You know, Canada. I don't know how many of you play golf. Anybody play golf? Okay, wow, okay, very few of you. All right, okay. I'm a terrible golfer. I once went and I said to the caddy, I was so frustrated, I said to the caddy, "You must be the worst caddy in the world." And he said to me, "No, that would be too much of a coincidence." But years ago, when you lead someone to Christ, you just needed a putter. You had to knock it from here to the hole which was over here. Now you need a driver because people aren't where they used to be. We've got to back the truck up. We need to learn how to present the gospel with relevance to a world that has shifted. But the gospel is still valid. My goodness, it's the power of God. Wow. I love Laura Buckingham. I mentioned him. Dr. Laura Buckingham is a good friend of mine from Moncton Wesleyan, the biggest church in the East Coast, and he just retired a year or so ago. And Laura Buckingham, I remember he was in his, I would guess he was in his 70s. And the business card that they had, that they gave out to invite people to church, he's in his 70s. Got it? And the card said, "This is not your parents' church." Isn't that cool? In his 70s. And when he noticed that they were not reaching a certain age demographic, he found out that they had it's a church of about 2,500 people, I guess. And he found out that between the 19 and 23-year-olds, there was a gap. They weren't reaching as many of them. So they brainstormed and put together a special service that they made very different. They called it Deep End because it wasn't shallow. And they did different music, different everything. It was interactive and all of those things. My point is simply this, that we need to understand, examine, and understand the culture. And the truth is that we're living in a world where young people are going through, having trouble finding jobs. And in Hong Kong, there was a pastor, and he saw a tattoo parlor, and they had pictures of all the tattoos you could put on the body, and one tattoo said, "Born to Lose." And the pastor went in, and to the guy, the tattooish, I don't know what you call him, barista. Okay. I went to the tattoo guy and said, "Who in their right mind would put "Born to Lose" on their body?" And the guy said, "Before tattoo on body, tattoo in mind." And we're living in a world where that's a challenge we're facing today. There's a world where there's lack of hope. In fact, a study done just a few years ago, 2013, it says the stress is weighing down Canadian youth, and 20% or 1 in 5 have a mental health issue today. The pressures of the world, the desperation of the situation. We need to understand our world. There's a book, it's old now, called Sex in the Snow, but it made a list, and I thought the list was pretty comprehensive, and I think it translates still, that the generation out there is experience-seeking. They want to feel God, encounter God. They're confident in adaptability, very flexible. They're concerned about their image. Okay, friends are the most important thing that they have, and God is way down the list, and family way down the list. They abandon fear and guilt and duty as motivating factors. They're no longer motivated by the sense of obligation. Okay? It's a pluralistic in values. They can live with contradictions and have no trouble with that. Flexible definition of family, the gay rights and all of that stuff. Permissive attitude regarding sex and focus more on immediate gratification. That's the world in which these young people are living. I have a friend who pastors a church that's got a lot of young people there. The average age is under 35, and it's a church of about 600 people. 600, under 35. And he said, we reached a woman for Christ, and this woman had 2 children. And this woman was from drugs, a hard background, came to Christ. Her children's name, this was their real name, was Hate and Anger. Can you imagine having a kid, Hate and Anger? I remember when I was teaching Sunday school years ago, I asked a little boy, the first time in Sunday school, "What do they call you at home?" And he said, "Stupid." Crazy world we live in. Crazy world. So let's go look at this. It says in Samuel 1:9, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. And this is the danger of us in our church, that we can lie down in our usual place and we can no longer see the culture in which we live. And the world has shifted, the world has changed, and we need to be aware of it and know how we can make a difference. When I came to Waterloo, I pastored 3 congregations very successfully. Took the first church from 14 people to 1,200, then took 2 other churches we were going to close, turn them around. That God was good. And then I came to Waterloo, and Waterloo was different. It's a university city, as you know, and I had 52 professors and doctors in the congregation that I was pastoring. And all of a sudden I realized that all the things that I'd done over 3 years weren't as relevant, over 3 churches, weren't as relevant anymore. And I realized that I had to reinvent myself. And I've had to do that many times, but this was a forced reinvention, to get down on my knees and say, "God, how do I reach this particular culture, this demographic?" And I think we need to all do that. Get down on our knees and say, "God, how can I stop doing the things that, because I've done them successfully before, how can I just let go of that? What is the new thing I need to do? How do I say, how do I communicate? What images do I use? What stories do I use to reach the culture in which we're living?" We need to explore and redefine reality, and we need to understand the culture. What's the first thing you do when you send a missionary to another country? They teach the language and they learn the culture. Well, we're in a foreign land now. We're in a foreign country. We need to learn the language and we need to learn the culture again. Okay. That takes me to 2. And we need to envision opportunities. Envision opportunities. Because this is not all bad. In fact, it's the exact opposite. This is the best of opportunities. There was a salesman who went to Africa to sell shoes, and where they sent him, nobody wore shoes. He sent an email back, I'm coming back, no opportunities. I can't sell shoes, nobody wears shoes. Sent another salesman to the same part of Africa, and he sent an email back right away saying, wonderful opportunities. Send all the shoes you can. Nobody here wears shoes. It just matters how you look at it. It's how you look at it. And with the brokenness of the world and the messing up of families and the hurting and the anger in our people, what an opportunity we've got. People know they need to be fixed. Woo, we're living in the best of times. Best of times. Wow. Opportunities are out there. So let's look what he says. The lamp of God had not yet gone out. And Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. The lamp had not gone out. It's not over yet. When something is down to embers, it can be brought back to fire. We can fan it back into flame. 2 Timothy, 1:16. I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God that is in you. Why does he remind us? Because if we don't do that, we let it die down. And that's why we're in a conference today. God, I don't want to leave the way I came. Lord, would you fan back into flame that passion I have for reaching people? Would you fan into flame the gift of God that you've given me? That I won't just go ho-hum, asleep. Wow. Oh, good. God is so good to us. You know that the top-selling books today are like The Power of Now, or The Four Agreements, or The Untethered Soul. Top-selling books because people are spiritually searching today like never before. Woo! We're living in a time where, this was Leonard Sweet, it's a bit old, but people are looking for experience, looking to participate, want interactive, want communal. That's what the church is about. Those 4 things are exactly what the community is looking for, and it's exactly what the church is meant to be. Woo! It is. That's it. If we become what we're meant to be, we will reach a culture. Boom. That was from the Greek for boom. Okay. This is what teen values. I was speaking in Vancouver for Anglicans, and I've told the story before, but you're hearing it again. Talking to Anglicans, and this priest came up to me, and he was, thank you so much, you've helped me so much, he said. I want to tell you that I had an older man in my congregation come up to me and said, you've got to tell the young people to stop wearing caps in church and do-rags in church because it's undisrespectful to the sacred. You need to preach against that, wearing caps in church. And he said, I lost it with the old man. I said, sir, you should be glad that young people in church, instead of worrying about the hats they're wearing, and once a month the bishop comes wearing a stupid hat that they're wearing, and you never tell him to take it off. Okay. I remember being in Paris, Ontario, years and years ago. A guy called Brother Edge, maybe some of you know him. Brother Edge went to be with the Lord. And he would have me come in, and he was an old man. I mean, I don't know how old he was, probably 80. And he had, for over 40 years, had rented school gyms on Saturdays. And he would show Christian movies, or he would have me come in and speak, or other people come in and speak. And at first, when he started, he would have been the father that the kids in the community didn't have. Then he would have been the grandfather the kids in the community didn't have. And now he was a great-grandfather. And he said to me, kids keep coming, and over 40 people are in full-time ministry that came to Christ in my meetings. You see, reaching people has nothing to do with age. If people know that you're real and you really love them, you'll do just fine. Let me show you this. Let's go to 3. So 3 is evangelism. The need to actually give hope. And we've had people talk about this earlier. You see, it tells us here in verse 7, now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. He wasn't a believer yet. Okay. I was in Red Deer just, a month ago or so. And I had the privilege of leading a young woman to Christ, 24-year-old woman to Christ. And just, the tears and seeing her life change. And I think, we get to do that. What a privilege. And I'm an ancient guy. I know that. Fred Flintstone was my neighbor. I know. But you know, it doesn't have to do with age if it's real. This is quick. I'm going to try to do this quick. This is a triquetra. Okay, it's used in many churches to show the Trinity. Some people say St. Patrick created it. But the first one is to believe. Believe. When I came to Christ, I believed first. And then immediately after believing, I became part of the church. So let me see if I can do the little light. Oh, I got the wrong thing. Okay, let me try again. There we go. No, I can't. I can't do it on a screen. Okay, so believe. You see how believe leads to belong. And then when I believed, and as I read the scriptures and grew in my faith, and I got the example of the church that were reaching people, then I went out into the streets to bless others, and I reached people for Christ and started witnessing and speaking on university campuses, and so hundreds of people come to Christ. But then I realized how little I knew. When you're out there doing it, you realize what you don't know, and so that forced me back to believe, and then to belong, to get prayer and support and encouragement and wisdom from others, and then out, and that is the Christian life. If you take the bless out of it, we're just a bunch of consumer Christians. Huh? Now, you know that today it works differently. Today, you know, many people will come to Christ, non-Christians, when you get them involved in a project. You know, they work side by side to paint a woman's shelter or something. And when they're there, they understand community, working with Christians, find out that we're not as weird as we look, most of us. Okay? And then it might lead them to believe. Okay. I was trying to help you. Okay. Let me read you a passage of Scripture that's challenging. This is from 1 Corinthians 9. And the Apostle Paul says, "To the Jew I become like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I become like one under the law, though myself I'm not under the law, so as to win those not under the law. To those not having the law I become like one not having the law, though I'm free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those who are under the law. To the weak I become weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings." I want you to see something here. Paul does not say they have to change and come to accept what I am. No, I change so that they will understand me. For the longest time, we've expected the world to change, come into our environment. Now it's time for us to change. Okay. There you go. Whoa. So, and then we have young people coming to Christ. Okay. Let me just zoom along. Empower and release. Empower and release. And so we see what happens with Samuel. Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling because God was calling Samuel. Samuel wake up, he'd go over to Eli, said, "Did you call me?" thinking that it was Eli. Then Eli realized, on the third time, by the way, that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" Now, I wonder why he took so long, Eli. Maybe he'd forgotten what it was like to be called of God. Or maybe he thought that God would never speak to someone with earrings and with tattoos and with their pants nearly falling off. Maybe he thinks, God wouldn't. You tracking with me here? Okay? Or maybe he's too young or something. But he gave good advice, and as a consequence, Samuel answers. That Mr. Tisdale was a teacher of young people at his church. And Mr. Tisdale was a bus driver during the week, and on the weekends he would teach a Sunday school class of 16-year-olds in his school, in his church. One 16-year-old, one day, feeling sorry for himself, getting older and thinking that this faith wasn't his faith, it was his parents' faith, not his, decided he would quit on church, feeling sorry for himself. Nobody will notice me if I don't go. So he stayed in bed and didn't go to church that Sunday at all, to the young people's meeting. The next Saturday, there's a knock on the door. Mr. Tisdale is there. Mr. Tisdale says, son, we missed you. And promises were made, and maybe it was a look of love in Mr. Tisdale's eyes, or the fact that he'd taken time on a busy Saturday to come to visit him. But promises were made at the door, and that young boy went back to church. 20 years later, this young man is now a pastor. And he writes a letter because he's never thanked Mr. Tisdale. And as he's sitting there, he says, dear Mr. Tisdale, I've never thanked you for coming to visit me that one day, a discouraged young man. But I want you to know that I became a follower of Jesus on that day, and that I am now a pastor preparing my sermon for Sunday. And I thought of what a difference you'd made. Thank you. 2 weeks later, he gets a letter back from Mr. Tisdale. Dear pastor, I'm in the hospital. I suffered a near fatal heart attack. When your letter came, it did me more good than all the medicine the doctors are giving me. I can't believe that something so small, so insignificant, that I did so long ago and nearly forgotten would give me such incredible joy. I thought my life was counting for nothing, and now your letter arrived. Thank you. What did Mrs. Tisdale do? Nothing that every one of us in this room can't do for young people. Show an interest, invest in them. That's it. It's quite simple. Empower them. I'm who I am because somebody called Kenneth Murray, 20 years older than me, saw potential in me and invested in me. There you go. So Samuel went and lay down in his place, and the Lord came and stood there, calling, as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, speak, for your servant is listening. Wow. And finally, finally, woo! Okay. Finally is the example of a mentor. Here's a quote from Craig. It says, the younger generation can smell fakes. You know, I can too. Authenticity trumps cool. There's a little girl, and she said, Dad, is it true that God is bigger than everything? Yeah, God is bigger than everything. Then she said, is it true that now that I've asked Jesus in my life, that God is in my heart? Yes, it is. If God is bigger than everything, he lives in my little heart, shouldn't he show through? The story I tell, and it's a fun story of a lady is driving with bumper stickers that said, God loves you, Jesus is the answer, are you ready to meet the Lord, etc. And she's driving on the bumper of the car in front, and she's honking the horn, and she's frustrated. The other person not moving fast enough. She's got the window open. She's yelling and cursing and swearing and giving the finger at the car in front and yelling, honking the horn. Behind her is a police car. He puts the lights on, and he pulls her over. He puts her on the hood of the car. She says, what are you doing? What are you doing? As she puts her in handcuffs, he said, ma'am, I read the bumper stickers on this car. Clearly, you have stolen this vehicle. Listen, if we live like that, if we keep living like that, we will not win anybody, because the world today can see through hypocrisy just like that. Maybe you don't wear bumper stickers, but you have a cross around your neck, or you read the Bible, or you go to church. People are watching you. The best witness we have is our life, because it gives us credibility for the message we have to speak. Wow. Okay. It says the boy ministered before the Lord under Eli. His kids were a pretty terrible state, weren't they? Wow. So let me go to the close. Let me just see what have we seen. If we're going to reach young people, we need to understand how the culture's changed. Take the effort to read and listen. We need to look for opportunities. Look for opportunities. There are incredible opportunities today to reach people for Christ. I have a story. I tell tons of stories. But one of my favorite stories, and one that directs my life, is a weird story. My dad used to tell it of two kids born. They were twins born, same parents, obviously. And they were so different, even though they were twins. My daughter had twins, and they are totally different. And one kid was the optimist, one was a pessimist, and one saw everything good, the other everything bad. So they decided to take them to psychiatrists to see how they could be so different. So they took the two little kids to observe, and they put one in the pessimist in a room full of toys, and the other kid that was the optimist in a room full of horse manure. And after After a couple of hours, they went to the kid that was a pessimist. He sat in the corner, hadn't touched a single toy. And they said, what are you doing? He said, this is a trap. These toys are going to break. So I played it safe, did nothing. The little kid that's the optimist is digging in the horse manure, covered in horse manure. They say, what are you doing? He said, with all this here, there's got to be a horse here somewhere. I love that story. I love that story because I think that way. The more manure there is out there, the more issues there are, the more opportunities there are if we look for them. Oh, yeah. And I believe the opportunities are there. So we need to look. There's got to be a horse here somewhere. Can't believe I told you that story. Okay. But we then see that as a consequence of the interaction, God uses Samuel to change the history of Israel. The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. Wow! Eli invested, in a weak way, in one young man, and look at the difference that he made. You can invest in one young person. That person could be the next Billy Graham. You never know. The Lord continued to appear in Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word. Wow. I'm going to close now. I pastored in Chilliwack. British Columbia. The church was going to close before I came. They were talking about shutting it down, and I was the last hope. They were desperate, weren't they? And God was very gracious. He turned it around, and we were into 2 services within not so long, and we reached a lot of young people, and God was very, very gracious. God is very gracious. I'm of the opinion that when you step out of the boat, God helps you walk on water. Yes, he does. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, I've got wet too a number of times. And one Sunday, an old lady shows up in church. We'd had a missionary speaker that day, and I believe in missions. I'm a big supporter of missions. And so this old lady shows up, and 80-something, I think. It's looking younger as I get older, but yes, 80-something. And I get to speak to her, and she says, I live in Abbotsford, which is about half an hour drive from Chilliwack, depending how fast you drive. And then I say, do you know Jesus? I said, oh, yes, she says. I've known Jesus since I was a little girl. Strong German accent, Mennonite background. And so this strong German accent. And she said, yeah, I've known Jesus. And I said, do you go to church? Oh, yes, I go to Northview. At that time, Northview Church in Abbotsford, was the most cutting-edge church probably in all of Canada. And they had the most cutting-edge music. They used the NIV Bible. They had testimonies. They had video clips. They had dramas. They even had one time when they flew the pastor in on helicopters with a 007 theme. Okay? This was a church that was out there, okay? And she said, that's a church. My husband and I were founders of that church. And I say, in that case, you are one of my heroes. She says, huh? Which means, huh? I'm a source of great information. And I said, you're one of my heroes. I said, well, you must have had to give up the German language because it was an English-speaking church. She said, yeah. I said, that must have been difficult. She said, yes, it was. And then I said, you must have had to give up your German Bible. Yeah. That must have been difficult. Yeah. Then you had to give up your King James Bible. That must have been difficult. She said, yeah. Then you had to give up singing hymns. She said, yeah. That must have been difficult. She said, yeah. Then you had to give up singing in 4-part harmony, which is sacrosanct to Mennonites. And she said, yeah. And I said to her, was it worth it? And the old lady started to cry. And she said, oh, Pastor David, every Sunday, the church is full of young people and young families. Every Sunday, we do baptisms every month. Lives are changed. We see stories, and the children and the grandchildren are coming, and they're there, and they're coming to Christ. Oh, she said, if I had to do it again, I would do it in a heartbeat. I was crying too now. I hugged the old lady, and I said, that's why you're my hero. And then she said this, I learned long ago, the church is not about me and my likes and my preferences and my wants. The church is about Jesus about the mission, about reaching people and doing whatever we can. I hugged her again. We cried together because it's old people like that that will reach a young generation in Jesus' name. I'm going to invite you to stand. Let me remind you, my book table is still there if you want to buy my book or get the free videos or the invitation to the Evangelism Conference. I don't know, Pastor, you're thinking of closing in some way, I'm sure. Okay? That's usually how we close. Okay? And there's my